Welcome to our Wednesday Key Opinion Leader Series. I am Jim Mayer, Education Team Director, broadcasting live here in St. Louis, Missouri.
And I'm Paul Satone. I'm the West Coast Education Specialist here at Vatech.
Welcome, Paul. I think we've got a lot of cool things planned this evening for our session, and we're calling it, 5-minute clinical case planning.
Right.
And I think we're trying to just talk about looking at a scan from the overall patient's total dental health is one of the things. How do we plan for this? Right. What does that involve specifically with the software, Paul, that we're going to be talking about today, and different features of the software we're going to review?
Yeah, so we're going to touch on some of the highlights of the software that we get a lot of questions about. We're going to kind of trade off kind of demoing each feature. So we're going to, like Jim said, take a look at the total scan kind of from top to bottom. We're going to show the best ways how to trace the nerve. So there's lots of different ways to trace it in the software. So we'll touch on, some of the easiest ways to do it. We'll take a look at implant planning, 5-minute implant planning, and creating a panoramic image from your CBCT, using the 3D pan for multiple reasons, including endo. And then finally, we'll finish up with what and when to export from the software. There's a few ways to do it, so we'll look at the best ways to handle that function also.
Yeah, and I think mastering all of these topics leads to that 5-minute clinical case planning. There's no reason we should be able to sit down and look at a CBCT like we look at a pan. Let's go through as well as review with the goal of patient's total dental health there. So I think a lot of cool stuff planned for this evening. So
upcoming events, we have some more Fast Track Fridays. If anybody has not attended one of our Fast Track Fridays, we do it typically 3 Fridays a month. So two days from now, this Friday, the 14th, we'll take a look at 2D and 3D imaging workflow. We'll go through the entire workflow and patient positioning this Friday. And then the following Friday, we'll take a look at Ez3D-i clinical case planning. So we'll go into several different cases for several different specialties, endo, implant, those types of things, airway, on that session. And all the Fast Track Fridays start at 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern, and you can sign up on our website.
For sure. In addition to that, we are bringing you the radiology hour in June. It's going to be with Dr. Vijay Parashar, and it's going to be his platform to review clinical cases from a radiologist point of view. So Q&A session, please check that out on June 18th. We also have our Key Opinion Leader Series extending into July with Dr. Todd Engel, and it's going to be a 3-part series, 3-part guided series actually, going over single site implant, multiple implant, and full arch implant. And that's going to be July through September. So check out our website for any of the web events, interactive web events we do have at vatechamerica.com. Paul, these are all really brought to us by feedback from our clients and communicating with us.
Right. And so any feedback for these or future webinars, please email the sales email address. Any questions for the education team, any software questions, you can email the education address. The CS address is for customer support, quick way to contact support. Of course, our website and our social media at Vatech America, and our new chat feature we have on our website that lets you in real time kind of chat with our support team. So lots of ways to get a hold of us on our site.
For sure. Yeah. So before we jump into today's session, let's look at what we're reviewing. We're using the GoTo webinar platform. You can see Paul and I, the presenters there, and you can always change the screen there with that red, the slider there. Off to the right, you've got your orange arrows to collapse the GoTo webinar. I call it the control center. If you're having any audio issues, click on the help button there and to troubleshoot those. If you do continue to have computer audio issues, just go ahead and call in on the phone and you'll be logged in and you can listen from there. This is actually a question and answer session too, so you'll have full access to myself and Paul and our whole education team, where you can chat back and forth with us. So if you do have a question, feel free to send that over to us. Unfortunately, there'll be no CE for today's session, but thank you for joining us. And let's go ahead and get into our session and look at our clinical cases, the 5-minute case planning. Today, we're going to look at an examination of the overall anatomical volume. In other words, we're going to look at the data set for any secondary or incidental findings. So to do this, I've opened up my Ez3D-i software, and as you can see, I have the 3D rendering open to the main window. I'm going to go over to my VR coloring and select teeth. This will highlight just the tooth structure, where we can get somewhat of an overview, looking at our impacted 17 and 31, also looking at 1 here, kind of going through the overall scan itself from a virtual rendering point of view. Another tool I use here is this MIP, which is maximum intensity projection. Go ahead and click on my MIP, and that's going to change it over to more of a grayscale. So we see we have RTC right here, and we can go ahead and rotate through. So next I'm going to change this back to my teeth mode, and I'm going to right click here on my axial slice, and let's switch this over to the main view. What this allows us to do is to see our main axial window we're focusing on, with also having our reference windows over on the right. So let's left click and drag this to the superior border of the scan. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to hit my spacebar on my computer to toggle off my reference lines. And next what we're going to do is go ahead and use the wheel on the mouse, and I'm going to scroll down and identify our anatomical structures. So we can see our maxillary sinus here looks clear on the right side and on the left. We can look through our septum, also through our nasal concha. Looking here at the wing of the sphenoid, keep scrolling down inferior, and as I'm doing this, I'm looking over off to the right to note my 3D slice going down inferior. Now if we stop right here, we can look in our left maxillary sinus. We do have something in the nasal cavity here. So this could be some sort of mucus retention cyst, but this would be something to note when we are going through our data set through here. So as we scroll down further, we're starting to the hard palate. You can start to see my incisive canal. Keep scrolling down. Down here. Now we're starting to see all of our root tips. I can see the PDL space through there. I can also see my impacted molar here and over here. So what is the relationship of the adjacent tooth? We can note our individual canals. Keep scrolling down. We can start to see our lingula here and here on the right side. All right, so now we're in the mandible, starting to look at our molars, our 17 and 32. I can see my horizontal impaction here, how it relates to the adjacent tooth. Here's our RTC. We can see some sort of issue running through that tooth, and if I keep scrolling down, we could probably call that some sort of a fracture. We will look at that more in detail. As I scroll through here, we can start to see our nerve on the left side and on the right side, and we can see some sort of lucency here over on the right side also. We just passed our mental foramen here on the right, and now we're going to get down inferior. You can see your hyoid bone. Now we're all the way through the bottom of the scan. So to reset this, I'm going to hit my spacebar on my computer. I'm going to do my reset here. And next, let's do our AP view and our coronal view. I'm going to go ahead and right click on my window here, switch to main view. Select my spacebar to toggle off my reference lines. Move my yellow line labial aspect of the image. Now, let me rotate this around so we can see where we're going. So now I'm going to scroll back posterior. We can start to see our 8 and 9. And as we scroll through here, start to see our incisive canal. Now we're going to see the width and the height of our ridge. We can start to see our sinus floor, and our paranasal sinus, nasal concha through here. And let's scroll back forward and back. We can start to see that root fracture that we were talking about. Our mental frame in here and here. And as we go back further, let's stop here and kind of analyze what we have. We have our mucus retention cyst here in the left maxillary sinus. We have our nerve here and our nerve here. Let's keep scrolling back posterior. And as we're doing this, we can use our reference on all of our other scans down here, our 3D and also our axial. You can see we're back by our second molars. And this is where we notice that lucency on the right side. In our maxilla, we can look at the relationship of our third molars there. And down in the mandible, we can start to see the relationship of our molars and how they're impacting the second molars through there. And I'm going to keep scrolling back posterior. We can look at our nerve here and here. We're now looking at our hyoid bone and scrolling back through posterior and almost all the way back through the scan itself. So this practice took us on this demonstration about 7 minutes with me going through and explaining everything. I believe that this can be done once we understand the software and once we understand the anatomy in a few minutes here. So I'm going to right click, switch to main view, hit the space bar, and we would just scroll through at a rather quicker pace. And this is where we might do some of our annotations. So let's go annotation. Let's circle this here. We could then take our screenshot and let's keep scrolling through. At this point, we could also draw our lines here, take another screenshot. That's going to be stored in our software. Let's keep scrolling down inferior. And at this point, we may do the same thing. Reference there, take our screenshot. Looking at our retreat with our root fracture, let's go ahead and take our reference there with another screenshot. And then scrolling all the way through. One more area of interest we're going to note. We can see the difference on the right side compared to the left side. We have nice trabeculation through there, marrow space, and here we have lucency. Let's go ahead and click our camera here. And as we scroll down inferior, we are now to the inferior border of the bottom of the scan. Next, we'll do the same thing with our AP view. In our coronal window, switch this to the main view, hit the space bar, and now we're going to go scroll back rather quickly, going through our scan, looking at the overall view. Once I find the area of interest, we're going to stop right in here, make a notation, take our screenshot there on that retreat, keep scrolling back posterior, make a note, take our screenshot, some easier ways to make notations in all of our windows for future reference or to send to the specialist. You can also note the relationship of our roots and our third molars here. And now essentially we are back to the back of the scan. So that is a quick and easy way to do an overall evaluation of the data set for any secondary findings or incidental findings we may find on the scan for patients' overall total health.
Thanks, Jim. So next, I would like to demonstrate how to easily trace the mandibular nerve. So there's a couple different ways to do it in the program. So I just want to highlight basically 3 different ways to do it and a couple thoughts on how I feel is the best kind of workflow and the easiest way to discover that. So first, I want to demonstrate this from the 3D pan window. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my 3D pan tab in my software. When we arrive at the 3D pan here, we have our reconstructed pan on the top and our associated slices on the bottom. So the navigation window is displayed in the center, so I just simply need to move that to the area that I want to focus on, which is going to be the lower nerve on either side. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the left side here. So to move the navigation box, a quick way to do it is just to double click down in my area. So I'm going to double click right on the exit of that nerve, and we can see that right on that reconstructed pan. So I'm going to do a double click and it takes me down to that area. So from here we can see I have our 3 red slices here, our 3 red lines on our navigation window, and that's associated with the 3 slices on the bottom. And I could scroll back and forth here with my mouse wheel on the center slice. So what I'm going to do here is kind of position this a little bit more symmetrical, and I'm going to rotate the navigation window so I'm more in alignment with the direction of my jaw, my arch. So as I scroll here, I'm going to actually scroll. I'm using a forward scroll on my mouse wheel until I get to the mental exit there. I can see it right here. So from here, now I can do a kind of a preview. I like to do this first before I start tracing it so I can make sure I can kind of see it all the way as I scroll back on my slice here. So I'm going more posterior all the way back, and I can clearly see that all the way through there. So I'd like to do that first, and then I'll navigate back to my mental exit there, and I'm just going to start tracing it. So I am going to click on the nerve tracing icon here, draw canal, and I'm going to simply just do a series of left clicks. I'm going to start a little bit outside here as I go into my exit area. Then from here to navigate, I'm just going to simply scroll back, click, scroll back a few times, click, and just kind of keep continuing that process. I can go a couple clicks or several clicks, it's up to you. I have my software set to 1 millimeter increments, so I'll do a couple clicks each time, and just simply, when I want to finish it, I'll just do a double click on it. And do a double click, and there my nerve is traced on my left side of my mandibular. If I need to edit my nerve, if I'm kind of scrolling through my slices and I notice it's a little bit off, all I have to do to fix that is just do a right click. First of all, just a couple options here. If I go to property, that could allow me to change the diameter of my nerve or the color. If I want to switch that to, let's say, yellow, I'll just go ahead and select that and click OK, and that'll change the color. Right click, I can also hide it or delete it right from here, or I could edit canal. So this will allow me to really scroll through my slices here, and if I notice it's a little bit off, I can just simply move any of the points I've placed as I go through here and edit that. And just to finish your edit, just do a double click anywhere on the screen, and it'll ask you if you want to save it. So click OK, and then there your edit is saved. So that is obviously really a quick and easy way to trace a nerve. However, I will say that sometimes it's very difficult to see it in this this coronal section slice, depending on the patient, depending on lots of different things. So I've gotten in the habit of just tracing it directly on the NPR tab right from the start. So and to trace it on the NPR, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to focus on my axial view. I'm just simply going to scroll down on my axial view, or I could grab the opposing lines in the coronal slice and bring it down just so I can see right about in the middle there, about the thickest part of that lower bone, where I can really see the outline of the lower bone on each side. So doing it this way, so that's my first step. Second step would just be to grab the intersection of these two plane lines and drag them over to whichever side of the arch I want to trace, or just simply double click on that side of the arch, meaning if I want to come over here to, let's say, the right side, I'm just going to double click over here, and then I'm going to angle this red sagittal plane line so it's going through the center of the arch on my right side. We're going to trace the right side of the arch. So I'm going to grab past the second dash here, because if I don't go past the second dash, I can only go left and right. So I'm going to go past that. I get my rotation arrows, and I'm going to simply click here and drag and move that sagittal slice. And at the same time, I'm also looking at the sagittal views. So my eyes are going back and forth to that sagittal slice here until I can see some of that nerve here. We can see, we have a little bit of a lesion there. And then, so I can see that there. So what I'm going to do next is navigate, and I'm going to angle it on the coronal slice to see if I can see more of that nerve here. I could also move it on the coronal slice a little bit down and left and right to also navigate that until I can see my best view of that nerve. And I can see right there in the sagittal view, I can now see that. And I can also scroll on the sagittal slice, just moving that sagittal slice back and forth, left and right, to follow that. So it's nice to have that nerve tracing all on one slice if you can get it there. A lot of times you can't, but that's kind of the goal when I'm first going about this. So I think that's pretty good right there. I can clearly see the nerve right there on the sagittal view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the sagittal title word, and it's going to zoom in my view for me. And then I'm simply going to start, I can scroll back and forth. I like to visualize it, the whole thing from the posterior all the way to the mental before I trace it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, again, click my nerve tracing icon right here. I'm going to start in the posterior and just start and do my series of clicks all along the canal, and I'm going to scroll back and forth to follow that right here on my sagittal view. I can also hit the space bar if the plane lines get in the way. I can hit the space bar. It toggles that on and off with the space bar, scrolling back and forth, and you can see I'm following it as it advances forward towards the mental. And around this area it may loop a little bit here, so it's sometimes a little bit difficult around that frontal area there. And then I'm going to scroll, and then I can see it goes up towards the mental here, and there's the exit right there. So I'm going to double click on that, and there is my nerve tracing on my sagittal slice from the NPR. So I find that the easiest way to do that. It's really personal preference and how you can see the scan. All right, so the third and final way I want to demonstrate tracing the nerve is going to be from the section tab. So you may or may not be using the section tab, but it also is another way you can trace the nerve here. So I have mine already set already. You can see I have my slice, all my slices here. We have on our pan view, I have this already situated here. So what I did to get there is when we first go into the section tab, we'll be right at the center of the arch here. So I can simply scroll over on my slices or grab this plane line here on the reconstructed panel on the bottom and kind of move it to the right until I can see my mental nerve here, which is going to be right here. So at that point, I find it easiest to double click on my center slice, and that zooms it in for me. So it's really nice to see it full screen. And now, again, I'm going to first scroll back and visualize my nerve all the way posterior, and then go back to the mental there, just so I can see how I can view it before I start tracing it. So now I can see my mental there. I'm going to click on my nerve tracing tool here, draw a canal, and just start plotting my points. I'm going to start outside the mental, coming in, and then I'm going to scroll back do a couple clicks, scroll back, couple clicks, scroll back, all the way to the posterior, or as much of it as I want to trace. Scrolling, clicking, and then when I'm finished, I simply double click here, and it's traced all the way on here. Again, I could right click it and edit if I need to adjust any of these points once I review it. And that is kind of the third and final way to trace my nerve here.
We're going to look at implant planning via the 3D-i Vatech software. I've pulled up my case here, and we are going to focus on tooth number 29, which is RTC. A couple of features in the 3D-i software. We do have this extract tooth function. So to run the extract tooth function, I'm going to click on segment. I'm going to go teeth segmentation and bone segmentation. This will run an algorithm that will identify all of our teeth and label them. If we need to relabel them, we could choose a certain tooth and click label objects and label it if it is improperly labeled. Once these functions are done, I'm going to go back to my NPR view, and I can click on extract tooth, select my tooth. You note that it disappears, and select OK. Now we have our site number 29. From here, let's focus on our 3D pan tab. First, I'm going to go and change my rendering to my MIP or keep it on teeth. Let's double click on our implant site, and I can rotate my viewing box here and see my sectional windows. So for this practice, I'm going to double click, focusing on one window. You'll notice you can see where the image has been cut out. I'm going to take my blue line and move it to where I think the crest of the ridge would be. And we can go ahead and take some measurements. So let's measure here. Across the ridge, crest of the ridge, down to the nerve. We'll do this on the lingual side, and I'll also do this on our labial side there. Move these out of the way, and now we have our different measurements. I'm going to go ahead and right click and hide, right click, hide, right click and hide. Next, let's go over to our insert implant, single implant. We'll look at our three ways to place our implant, starting with our axis. Axis being that the blue line here, the axial blue line, is going to be where the platform of the implant will be placed. The angle will be followed along this red line. So if I click my 29, I already have it preset for Straumann and my bone level rock solid. We will choose our 4x8x10, click on insert, and our implant has been placed. I do notice I do need to move the implant. I'm going to left click on it and move it to my implant site. And now I can scroll distal and back mesial to look at the location. And if needed, let's double click. We can come in and take our measurement to look at the distance from the ridge and from our other anatomical structures. And also click back on the implant if needed and move it. Other distal, you can see our access point here. Click on this, and if we do need to rotate, we can to look at the opposing arch there. Let's go ahead and delete off our measurements. And we'll delete that there, and let's double click here to go back to our main window. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and delete my implant off of there, and let's look at two other options for placing our implant. We go back over to insert implant. We do have our click point, which allows us to choose our tooth. And I'm going to go ahead and add a crown on our implant this time. And if I click insert, I get a pop-up window. This tells me which implant to place, and my cursor becomes the implant. Now I can click on my area, and the point of my cursor is going to be the platform of the implant. So let's left click here. You can see my implant has been placed. I can click on the implant and rotate my implant. Click on the crown. This will allow me to move my crown and adjust as necessary. You can also do the crown down approach. If we need to place the crown first, get that situated, and then place our implant. So that's the second way to place our implant. Right click and delete. Let's right click and delete. Now let's look at another way to place our implant. I'm going to go insert implant. We are going to use our smart placement. Choose our tooth. Let's choose our crown. In addition to the crown, I'm going to add the guide and the path. Click on smart, and once I click insert, you'll notice the implant is automatically placed in the trajectory of what was removed through our segment when we cut out the tooth number 29. So let's rotate this to go down the long axis. You can see our implant has been placed. I can come in and move this if necessary. Scroll more mesial back distal. Click and drag this down inferior. Click on my crown or implant, and I'm moving my crown itself. And I'm going to move this out of the way. You can see our guide and our path that are also on the image there. And that shows the implant being placed. And I can scroll through. Now if I do need to move this, I can come over to my 3D pan window up here, 3D panoramic, with the space bar, and I'm going to right click on the implant and show controller. This allows us to move this in our 3D pan three-dimensional, so I'm going to grab my arrow here, move this a little more mesial. Maybe we want to rotate this here and adjust that. Now as I scroll through here, we can see our implant placed, and I can work back and forth here. I want to move this further distal, more lingual, rotate here, and scroll through to look at the placement of our implant itself. Once we are happy with our implant here, let's go back to our MPR screen. And I'm going to right click here. And I'm going to go down to Start Oblique Menu. Click on my oblique menu. You'll notice that the implant and the long axis of each window is going through the implant. I have my green arrow on my upper right axial window, which corresponds with our oblique window here. I can grab this line and rotate around my implant, looking at in 3 dimensions all the way around our implant. I do have the option of grabbing these boxes here and dragging this out, or moving this in closer to look at my image. Click on oblique to delete off of there, and do my reset to reset my image here. Now we can see our image placed. If I do need to resize my crown, I can right click on the crown itself, edit crown, and we can change our height, change our mesial distal to have that fit in our space. And if we do need to move that, hit OK. We can right click again and do our show controller, and we can move our crown itself in our virtual rendering here. So to go back and look at what we did, let's right click and delete this off of here. Hit my space bar. Quick summary. went to our MPR, extracted our tooth, went over to our 3D pan. Just going to simply double click on the area, rotate this for the angle of my implant. We note where our nerve is, take my measurements. From there on, we can go to insert implant, choose our tooth number. In this case, we're going to add our crown. Click on one of our placement options. I'm going to go with access. Click insert, and my implant is placed. And now I can move this as needed and rotate also as needed. And there we've placed our implant.
All right, thanks, Jim. So next, I would like to demonstrate the 3D pan and the reconstruction of the 3D pan and a few features in that. So I'm going to navigate to my 3D pan tab. Ideally, this 3D pan image on the top, it is a reconstructed pan. It is automatically, it has an arch automatically created, which really you can't see from the start here. So if your 3D pan looks a little bit distorted, that may be because of positioning issues. So if the patient is malpositioned in the machine when you take the CT scan, that's going to affect the way this auto pan essentially is created. So if you have to edit this, what you can do is you can go over to Create Panel on the left. So if you notice on the left side under the 3D pan section, here we have Create Panel. So this is if you have to edit your essentially this auto curve. If I go into Create Panel, we can see the upper curve image on the right is a little bit not in alignment with the arch. So to fix that, I could simply grab my points here, those green squares, and just align them a little bit more ideally with the arch. So I'm going to put these right about in the center of the arch all the way through. And we can even see on the preview there, I can see more ideal anatomy there. So once I hit OK, it will then regenerate this, and we can see that's a little more realistic as far as that reconstructed pan. So just going back into that, again, click Create Panel. We have our points that is really our automatically generated curve here. So I could just grab the points. Another way to do it is I could just, if I want to simply redraw the whole curve there, I could go to my tools in the upper left. We can see that you want to go to the third one right here, which is Draw Curve, and I could simply click on this and then just redraw the entire curve. Just do a series of clicks around the arch here and right through the center, and at the end just double click, and there I just essentially redrawn my own curve. A couple other tools in here while we're in here. We have the panning tool and the zooming tool if you do want to move these images around. This will reset my view. Again, this will redraw the curve, and this icon here resets the curve back to the start. The other thing I could do that I find handy, if you want to just expand the maximum view here, I could grab this yellow line here on the upper left front image here and pull it up. If I want to see more into the sinus here, I could also do that. Or if I want to see less, if there's some space under the chin, I want to kind of get rid of that, I could clip it up as well, and then hit OK, and it will display accordingly there. Okay, another feature here I want to just talk about, which I find that some clients are confused a little bit about, is the scout view on the lower left side. So we can kind of figure out, if I move my navigation block, let's say over any of these teeth to kind of view them, I have my slices view here. The scout view is basically a rotation feature here. So we can see these little blue buttons here, lingual buccal, is what those are standing for. And then if I can click this, I can kind of rotate around the tooth. But if I'm not exactly in the center of it, it's because we have to adjust the center point on this. So even if I move this to, let's say, one of these teeth here, I can rotate around here, but I may not necessarily be right in the center of it. So if you do want to fix that, what we do have to do is go back to that same area, go to the Create Panel tab, and if it's off, we can see that wherever this white line, this is the center of our curve, that's where that rotation tool focuses on. So if you do want to move that, what I would recommend is if you want to rotate around a specific tooth, just make sure this white line is going through the specific tooth. So in other words, if I want to rotate around the second molar on this side here, I'm probably going to align this so the white line is going right through the tooth here. Then click OK, and then I can move my navigation box over that tooth, and I'll be right, basically right in the center of it, and I could rotate around that way a little bit more efficiently. So if I navigate to my second molar here again, I can see that blue point is right in the center of that tooth. So now I can, pretty evenly rotate around that one specific tooth here. And again, where that blue dot is based is all based on the curve. So if I go to create pano, we can see it's based right through the center of that white line if you need to adjust that. Okay, so those were a couple tips on the 3D pan there. So next I just want to address a little bit of tools utilizing sort of the endo mode here in the 3D pan. So I'm going to go ahead and reset my plane view back to the start. And we have our navigation box. Again, I could grab inside the box and move this box around, or I could simply double click. So if let's say I want to take a look at one of these molars on this left side here, I can simply double click and use my blue navigation buttons here to rotate that box. Again, these three lines that you see on the navigation window are in relation to these three slices on the bottom. So if I do a right click on my slice here, we have presentation mode, and that just simply wherever you are zooms in and gets away from the menu on top. We have our thickness and interval. Thickness I find, except for certain cases, I usually will leave at 0. The interval is the distance of those slices. So we can see mine set right now to 3 millimeters. If I put it to 5 or 10, for example, those slices are now 10 millimeters apart. You can see the red lines here, 10 millimeters here, 10 millimeters here. So the point of me showing this is I want to, for endo mode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the interval and put it all the way down to 0.1, meaning those slices are 0.1 millimeters apart from each other. They're so close together, it actually looks like there's one line here, but there's actually 3. So, if I'm looking at this tooth for endo, I can obviously scroll left and right through it and get the most refined view that way. But what I want to do here is I'm going to grab this navigation box. I'm going to grab the blue dot on the right and rotate this so my red line is horizontal or really perpendicular with the tooth here. And we can see I'm right at the crown here where this red line is. And now, this will give me my best endo view. So I'll see the most detail doing it like this because I'm at 0.1 millimeters. And now as I scroll down on my slice itself, my slice 374, I'm going to go ahead and scroll through and I will get my endo view here. And I can clearly see all my canals there. I can also hit enter here and zoom that in, and that will full screen for you there. So that's just my endo view on a molar there. And then let's go take a look at one of these other teeth. So let's look at the second bicuspid here, which we can see has a crack on that. So looking at my second bicuspid here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and flip this box up, grab my blue rotation arrow button here, flip my box up, and I'm already at my 0.1 millimeter interval by right-clicking, right? So we're good there. Now I can simply scroll up and down on that tooth to get my endo view here. So I'm going to hit enter, and now I'm going to scroll, and that is going to be my best endo view there. We can clearly see we have some issues with this tooth here. I can also double click on the slice itself and that will zoom in even further. So that is kind of the most you can zoom in and out on that. So I'm scrolling down through the tooth, back and forth this way to get my best endo view there. All right, so that's just taking a look at these teeth through my view here. So the other way you can look at this is going to be through the section tab. So for my endo view, doing it this way, what I'm going to do is scroll up or down, depending on where I want to look. I'm going to look at the second bicuspid again, and I'm going to just simply double click on it. And I want to get a good view of it in the sagittal view before I draw a curve. So what I like to do is angle this a little bit so I can get a real nice view of it on the sagittal view. Then from there, I'm simply going to draw a curve. And this time, instead of drawing, if you're used to using the sagittal, the sections tab, you're accustomed to drawing a curve around the arch. But in this example, we're going to click Draw Curve, and instead we're going to go on the sagittal view and draw the curve right through the center of the tooth. So I'm going to start writing the occlusion. I'm going to do a series of clicks right down the center of this second bicuspid here, and then I'm going to do a double click at the bottom. So this, I've simply drawn my curve instead of around the arch, this time through the tooth, and we can see we have all our slices up and down here. So as I scroll through that tooth, I can see my canals right here. And again, if I want to enlarge this, a couple of different ways you can do this. I could grab these green dots and move them in and kind of focus my view. I could also hit the Control key and scroll with the mouse wheel, and that will zoom in my view. I find that really helpful. So that's just a Control on the keyboard, and then scroll with the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Or again, if I want to full screen this to this panel, I could do a double click and do it that way, zoom in, zoom out. But basically, similar to the 3D pan, this time with the intervals are on the left side of the screen under the curve section. And you can see we're set to 1 millimeter. So if I want to put that down to 0.1 to get the most detailed view, I can go to 0.1 here, and we can see now there's tons and tons of slices here on my curve. And now I can really scroll up and down this tooth to get my best endo view right here, going up and down it through the entire tooth. So that is viewing this on the section tab.
Let's look at our smart case here for our 5-minute case planning. First, I'm going to rotate around and look at our image. You can identify several impacted molars, an issue here on 29. Next, I'm going to right-click, switch to main view, hit my spacebar to toggle off the control, move my cursor to the top of the scan and start to scroll down. Here I'm looking at all my anatomical markers, noting any issues we may have in the scan. And along the way, I will be annotating areas and taking screenshots. So let's keep scrolling through our image. And now we are going through our occlusion, looking at our molars. I can see my horizontal impaction. Here's where I've made an annotation. Let's take another screenshot. Scrolling down, we can see our root fracture on 29. As we keep scrolling down, a lucency here. Let's go ahead and click our area. You can see right there where I did my annotation and mental framing, and we are getting to the bottom of our scan with our highlight bone. Next, I'm going to do my reset NPR, and we're going to bring our coronal screen to the main focus, drag our yellow coronal line to the front, and scroll back posterior. Same thing, just scrolling with the wheel on my mouse, identifying mental framing. We can see our root fracture. Let's take another screenshot. And something in here in the sinus we had discussed. And scrolling all the way through our image. Right here, another screenshot. And we are back into the ramus, looking at our relationship to our nerves all the way through the scan. So that, we'll call it practice, but that took us about 2 minutes. Next I'm going to go over to my 3D pan, And let's look at tracing our nerve. So come over here, rotating through, scrolling back posterior, and coming up to my nerve trace here. I can see my nerve here. Let's left click to place a point, scroll forward and left click, and just clicking and scrolling. Once I get to my mental framing, I'm going to double click to finish my nerve, and in this case I'm going to scroll further interior and trace this little interior loop, and double click, and now we have our nerve traced. So I'm going to go back to my NPR and let's look at our extract tooth function. Let's bring this to the front window. Extract tooth, we're going to remove 29, hit OK, and you can see our tooth is gone. Back to our 3D pan, let's double click on an area. We can go into measurements where we're going to measure our ridge down to our nerve. We could take a screenshot there. I'm going to go ahead and right click and delete these off of here. Let's place our implant on 29. Have this preset. We're going to add our crown, go through access and click insert, and our implant has been placed. We can drag this right to the center and rotate through. And there is our implant placed. Next, let's look at some endo. So let's go up here, double click. We can rotate this horizontally. And as I scroll up and down through our scan, I'm going to go over and change this to my max sharpen. And we can look and see our individual canals through our molars there. And then let's do our reset. And really, we've kind of identified different pathologies in the scan. We've traced our nerve, we've planned our implant, and this has all been within right about 5 minutes. So I think the majority of the time we spent was really doing analyzing the scan itself for any secondary or incidental findings. From there, we did go through and take some screenshots. So you can see here, I'm going to refresh my screen. You can see all the screenshots that we took up at the top right here. So this was about a 5-minute practice, noting any secondary findings, planning our case, and then ultimately going to our consult and relaying this to our patient, which would be our next steps. We have our Ez3D-i open. We've worked up our case with our nerve and our implant. Let's go ahead and look at different ways to export the data, specifically with our viewer. So on my Ez3D-i, I'm going to choose my export. Click on export here. I have options to export this as a CD/DVD or local disk. So local disk meaning that we're going to export it to a flash drive or the desktop. For this practice, I'm going to export this specifically to my desktop or a folder. Other options over here, you have compression. You have options to compress the file. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on lossless. You can password protect it. Check to export. So you'll see shadowed here is always going to be the CT data. So the DICOM data will always be sent. In this case, I have my project file and my viewer checked. So this is going to give the receiving party an option to be able to open the DICOM on the Vatech viewer. Lastly, we have the option to anonymize the patient's information. So we can send it anonymized or send it with the patient's information. So I'm going to go ahead and I have my project file and my viewer checked. I'm going to click on save. And it's going to ask us where do we want to save. So I do have I've created a folder, Vatech CBCT export. I'm going to click on select folder. So what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and export, wrap it up with the viewer and DICOM, and it is currently exporting. So once we have exported, you're going to get this message. The file is exported successfully. So I'm going to select OK, and I'm going to go down and find that folder here. So we have successfully exported. So I'm going to go ahead and find my folder here, and I've got my Vatech CBCT export folder right here. And Paul, do you want to talk about what's in this folder and how we launch this and what the receiving end is going to get?
Yeah, so we want to think of this example as kind of like if you were the referring doctor or patient that you gave, the CD to, if it was a CD, or in this case, Jim just exported it to the desktop, but it's the same information in these files. So, because a lot of times, if an office can't open the files or something, they have to be instructed just kind of how to. So, in these folders in here, in the main folder, it's going to have the series of the patient information number there. So if we just go ahead and double click on the folder, inside the folder there's going to be some files. So there's a bunch of stuff in here, but really just two things to be kind of notate here is, number one, the CT folder is where all the DICOMs are located. So if we go in there, we can see that's all the DICOMs. So you could pull those out if you had to. And if we go hit the back button there, Jim, we can go back. So that's where the DICOMs themselves are. And then the other thing just to notate is you want to have them click Simple Viewer Launcher. So that will open up the software. Now, if you burn it to a CD and the party who gets the CD puts it in the computer, it should pop up to this automatically. But if it does not, just have them open the file just like we did and click Simple Viewer Launcher. So when this opens, we can see we have two options. We have Simple Viewer Original, which is the Ez3D-i software that you have, the most current version. If they have a strong graphics card that can run it, then they can use the original, and it will be the same Ez3D-i interface that you're used to, that we have in the back of the screen. But if they have an older computer, they can also open it with the Simple Viewer Lite to the right of it, and if they click that, that will install just an older version of the software, but they'll still be able to open the scan and view it in its entirety that way. So those are the two different options. Whether you're burning it to a CD or if you're exporting it, it's the same functions.
Yeah, and Paul, let's go ahead and actually, I'm going to go ahead and double click here on the Simple Viewer, and we're going to go ahead and launch our 3D Plus. So I'm going to go ahead and double click here, and let's go ahead and look at our 3D Plus software. So here you can see the Ez3D Plus software, which is the Simple Viewer.
Right.
That you have the option of opening. So it's either going to be opened in the Ez3D-i if they have the proper video card, or the Ez3D Plus if the receiving office does not. So those are really the two ways to two options once we've exported with the viewer.
So the second option that we'd like to demonstrate is how to export a CT scan if you're going to send it, for example, to like a lab or another office that has Vatech, or a party that doesn't need the viewer included. If you're sending it to a lab, typically they'll want just the DICOM files, not anything else. So to do that, all we need to do is open up EasyDent as we see it on the screen. We can see we have our scan right in the center of the screen, taken on May 22nd, so 2018. So we're going to just go ahead and do a right click on it, and we're simply going to select export. So that when we do this, the interface will be similar as last time. However, you can see now either you pick local disk or CD just like before, and there is no other option because you're going to get just the DICOM files themselves. The only option here, and it's really handy actually, is to compress it to a zip file. So that'll save you the trouble of having to zip it up yourself. So you can compress it. You could put a password if you wanted, and then just simply hit export to export those files, and we're going to put it right here on the desktop and export.
Well, this is also an option if you're going to send it to, including the lab, but a lot of radiologists want it this way. So this is when I send it off to my radiologist, they're going to want to just have the DICOM data. They don't need the viewer, they have their own viewer there.
Right, absolutely.
And so let's look and see what we have in that folder that's, a little bit different than we just exported before. So this top one here, you see, this is how we did it with the viewer. But this last one here, as you can see there, is all just of our DICOM slices. So no viewer, just the individual DICOM. And then this is what the office is going to import into their other software.
So thank you for joining us for our education webinar here in our 5-minute clinical case planning. Any questions that we have not answered or you may want to ask, please feel free to email us at education@vatechamerica.com, and we'll get back to you promptly on that. So just kind of in summary here, we took a look at the scan kind of from top to bottom, total patient's health. We focused on how to trace the nerve. We talked about fast and efficient implant planning with oblique included. We talked about creating a pan image from your CBCT, 3D pan, and also endo features. And then we finished up with how and when to export data and taking a look at that. So we had a lot of features in there today. So upcoming webinars that we have available, again, this Friday, we have our Fast Track Friday on the 14th at 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern. We'll talk about 2D and 3D imaging workflow and patient positioning. And then again, the following Friday, the 21st, at the same time, we'll take a look at Ez3D-i software in detail. We'll look at several different cases in that session on the 21st. So lots coming up. And then Jim, if you want to talk about our future KOL series.
So coming up, we are teaming up with Dr. Vijay Parashar. He's bringing us his radiology hour. This is going to be a platform where he reviews clinical cases from a radiologist point of view standpoint. That's going to be June 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's also actually a Friday there. We continue our Key Opinion Leader series in July with the Guided Surgery series. Dr. Todd Engel's going to be reviewing single site implant, multiple implants, and full arch, and that's going to be a 3-part series ending in September. So please look at our website, vatechamerica.com, to sign up for those sessions.
So on our website, we have lots of resources available in our Customer Learning Center. So if you navigate to the Service and Support tab and scroll down a little bit, you'll see our Customer Learning Center, where we have video content for, number one, take your images under 3D imaging. So those are all videos by device of how to take images. So if you have new staff, for example, it's a great place to first send them to watch videos there. We have, under our software column, we have Ez3D-i, for example, under our software column on all software related content. And also that's where our webinar, recorded webinars are stored. And you can access any of the recorded webinars on there at any time. So lots of resources here. And then also we have an FAQ page on our website. Anytime, maybe you want to quickly search for an article, a help guide, how to export a scan, a burn a CD, those types of things. It's a great resource to start. Just type in what you want to search for and you get help documents for all those topics. How to sanitize my device, those types of things, all on our FAQ page on our website.
And then finally, I just want to thank everybody. Paul, thank you for co-hosting with me for all of our web events. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we look forward to everyone continuing to join us in the future on our web sessions. And thank you all for your support and becoming part of the Vatech family.
Thank you.